Hello and welcome to It'll Be Alright in the 90s, the podcast that categorically denies accepting cash for questions, but is nevertheless completely open to paying cash for questions, jokes, anecdotes, gossip, whatever you can offer. I'm Alex, Green Party Greenwood, and joining me is Stu Labour Jocelyn. How are you, Stu?
I've got to be honest with you, mate. I'm not great.
What's happened?
I'm not great. I cooked a Thai curry for tea, and I've been a bit careless with the chilies, and my eyes and my one of my nostrils are totally burning.
Oh dear.
So always wash your hands, kids, when you're using chilies in dinner preparation. But I'm battling on. I'm here. We're still here for the record, and nothing gets in the way of the pod for me. So we'll be all right. We'll be all right, I'm sure.
Good. There's me thinking you were just getting emotional about the intro, but your eyes are streaming for a different reason.
I think that's possibly the best one we've ever written. I say we've ever written. You wrote it, so but that's possibly the best one we've ever done, and it's all you. So congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. I do like a bit of politics. It turns my brain on. I get switched into gear when I talk about politics. So maybe that inspired the intro.
Well, we should be in for a good episode tonight then.
Yeah, I hope so. Before we get into that, though, today's episode is sponsored by Cresta Lemonade. So you can get 20 pence off a 2-litre bottle of Cresta in any participating Happy Shopper or Spar convenience store. That's before the end of May, and it's while stocks last. So please don't hang around, because we know that it's popular stuff, Cresta Lemonade. And yeah, so that's our episode sponsor for this episode, Cresta Lemonade. It's frothy, man.
I used to love Cresta with the polar bear and the sunglasses on the label. Yeah. Does that offer extend to Chaplin's in Corsham, which is where I used to pick it up? Cresta, or is it just Happy Shopper and Spar?
I think it's just Happy Shopper and Spar. I don't think it goes to sort of independent convenience stores and corner shops. But I mean, you could ask.
No, that's okay.
Sure.
I'll go to the Spar, which is just down the road from the Two Pigs. That's fine. I can go out of my way a little bit to get that. That's fine.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
It used to be full of Spars, didn't it? There was the old one behind Corsham Regis. My primary school used to go for my tangy Toms after school, and
brilliant. I used to get a Twist and Squeeze from there. Do you remember those?
No, what was that?
It was just like a very slim plastic bottle of juice, but you just
yes.
You just twisted the cap off, and then it was off, and you couldn't put the cap back on, and it was yeah.
I sort of associate them with school fates, much the same as Calippos. Is that what they called? Or Calypso? I think they were called Calypso. Calippo is the ice lolly. Calypso is the drink that you pierce the top, the film on the top, and
that's right. Yeah.
Tasted like sugar, water, and food colouring, basically.
You see, by the time I got to secondary school, they'd been pretty much replaced unilaterally by the Panda Pop.
Yeah, it was a very hostile takeover by Panda Pops, wasn't it, I think?
And there was a fashion when I was at secondary school, and we used to get. Do you know? It's funny. This should come up. I was thinking about this earlier on. My maths teacher in year 7, Mrs. Merriman, I still see her around in Chippenham Town Centre sometimes. So, hi, Miss, if you're listening. And we used to be able to get Panda Pops at break times and at lunch times, as I'm sure you well know. And I remember once we were in for the lesson after break time, and everybody was acting quite quite hyperactively. And I remember her giving us a bit of a sermon about this rubbish you all drink at break time, and it hinders your concentration, and you shouldn't have it, and all this sort of thing. And I remember there being a certain irony in the fact that she'd probably been in the staff room at break time having about 3 cups of coffee
that's true.
at the same time. But now, having obviously worked in education as well, I can see the need for that also. But anyway, back to my point. Sorry, there was a craze for, and this is possibly because people missed stabbing the straw through the top of the Calypso. I don't know, but people would scrape the bottom of the bottle along a wall to create a hole in the bottom of the bottle, just where the bottom of the bottle away a bit, and then squeeze it into their mouth from that bottle in like a super fine like mist. Instead of just taking the top off and drinking it as any normal person would. I don't know when that died out. Maybe it's still happening. I don't know. Maybe it's been handed down through the generations. But there we go.
That was not happening when did you say this was secondary school?
Yes, yeah. So
this was
2001.
Not happening at Corsham School when I was Well, I was there at that point, but maybe I was just in a
Yeah, but
different area.
you were older and cooler, so I doubt you would have
Yeah.
seen it happening.
We
We knew where to hang out.
I think we've got some correspondence, haven't we?
Yeah, we do. We've got a few bits and pieces to read out. Shall I go first?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Why not? Why not? Indeed. So, our old friend Alex Mitchell's been in touch, and this is regarding the Movies of 1990 podcast, which came out a few weeks ago. He says, with regards to Rocky 5, I always wonder how long Rocky was in Russia for in Rocky 4. Because when he leaves, his kid is around 4 or 5, and then when he comes back in Rocky 5, he's a teenager. Which is a fair point. And he also says, on the point of the ridiculous Home Alone house, do you reckon Peter McAllister is the leader of a drug cartel or something? Because that's the only way he could possibly get enough money to run that house, that amount of people, and take everybody away at Christmas to the other side of the world.
There is something very suspicious about the fact that they've got a house that size. Fair. Yeah.
He must have one hell of a good job. That's all I can say.
Yeah, something's going on there.
Mm.
Well, we know that he's sort of prone to child abuse or child neglect, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was perfectly open to drug smuggling and whatever.
Maybe this is something that's expanded upon in the new Home Alone, which came out last year, which I haven't watched. Maybe the answer's waiting there. Maybe there's some reference to him being in Nick or something like that, and we just haven't uncovered it yet.
Yeah, there should be a spin-off or an origin story about the parents, I think. I'd like to see it. I'd see it.
Like the Book of Boba Fett, but for Home Alone.
Yeah.
Before you write in,
Kevin's dad.
I'm not a fan of Star Wars, so I don't know if that's an accurate joke to make. All right, so please don't write in. I'm just, what is a Star Wars origin? Like Rogue One? I honestly don't know.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. Also, just one more bit before we move on. So as promised, I put up the only picture I have. I should have taken some more, but I never did, sadly. The only picture of my Fiesta LX in Ford Blue, which was promised a few weeks back. And legend of the pod, Kate Pro, wrote in and said, my auntie had this car too. And then she tags her auntie into the post and says, could this be the same car? Which would have been huge if it was true, obviously, that something so coincidental happened. But then I was worrying about how we would break the news to her aunt that I had allowed her old car to be stolen.
I thought that it was that Kate Pro was suggesting that her aunt had after you and therefore was implicated in car theft.
No. Just that I think the implication was that it was before she'd had it before me.
Oh, okay. So we're clear on this that Kate Pro's aunt is not a car thief.
That's right. Yes.
Well, actually, we're not clear on that. We just know that she definitely didn't steal your car. That's all we can say.
I suppose so. Yeah, that's all we have proof of. Yeah. I mean, car crime together we'll crack it. When was the last time you heard that? Blimey. Anyway, so she checked up on it and she came back to us later on in the day to say it's a shame. Same make, model and colour, but different reg. Oh no, she says maybe she bought your stolen car and the reg was changed. But that's too far-fetched. I suppose only as far-fetched as RoboCop 2. Okay. So there we go.
So yeah.
So nothing conclusive there, but all we can say is that Kate Pro's aunt might be a car thief. We can't say either way. Is that the official line we're going for?
Yeah,
here?
I think that's the official line. Okay. I mean, Kate Pro sounds like she's putting that idea around, isn't she? She's saying she's put the idea of changing the number plates. So
that's true. It's nothing to do with us. That. Yeah. She's posited that theory. Absolutely. Oh, wow. I wash my hands of it.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's move on quickly.
Now, yeah. Okay. Hannah Kelly Fletcher also got in touch. This was on Facebook. This was about our Films of 1990 episode from a few weeks back. And she's given us some nice feedback on it. She says, just had a listen whilst doing a bit of gardening. Another great episode. Thanks for the trip down memory lane. Thanks, Anna. I have to agree with Stu about preferring Arnie's fluff movies. They epitomise 90s movies for me. And the mention of arachnophobia brought back a memory of watching it on TV with my older cousins and hiding behind the sofa. Terrifying. Yes, thanks for that, Hannah. I'm glad you also found arachnophobia as scary as I did when I watched it back in the day. And some more Kate Pro Legend of the Pod correspondence here. Again, relating to the films of 1990 episode, she says, basically she agrees with you, Stu, about the issue of the older brother complex, which I think was that lots of 90s films have mean older brothers. Is that what it was?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
certainly Home Alone, Back to the Future, that kind of thing. Yes, and I don't like it very much. It has to be said.
Yeah, it was certainly a bit of a trope. Older siblings, and specifically older brothers, not being very nice in the 90s. And also, Kate Pro messaged me on WhatsApp to say that I have just seen the Badgerline bus holding up traffic on the ring road. I squealed. And that's all she said about that. But that obviously relates to one of our previous pod sponsors, Badgerline Buses, which can only really point to the fact that this is the first sign of sponsorship of the pod leading to a revival of a 90s business.
I think so. I think, yes, it's obviously that the power of the pod has come through, and Badgerline's back on its feet. So, no, congratulations to us and to Badgerline, and long may it continue.
Yeah, long may it continue holding up traffic on the ring road. Lovely to see.
What do you think is the minimum discount we can expect on the buses for that? Well, you in particular, if they're making a comeback in Bristol only, I probably won't see it over here in Pewsey. But
I just thought they'd give me a child's fare at least for that.
I think that's fair. Yeah. Time for What's the Most 90s. This week, it's my turn to pose a question to Alex. And quite simply, Alex, I want to know who your most 90s stand-up comedian is this time, please.
This is was a humdinger. I struggled a bit to pin this down. My first thought was Lee Evans, because I know he was massive, maybe one of the biggest, definitely one of the biggest in the 90s. And then I went to Jack D, but then maybe he's a bit too famous, like since the 90s. And in the end, I just went for Jethro. He's an old school comic. He's sort of pre-alternative comedy. He kind of represents a dying breed of comic, I think, that is didn't really last long into the new millennium. But I've never actually seen Jethro. I've never seen any of his stand-up, so I don't know how accurate that is. But I just think he represents that sort of non-alternative comic who, was sort of pretty big in the 90s, but then disappeared very shortly after. So that's what I was going for, I think. Jethro, what about you?
I actually saw Jethro live twice.
Oh, did you?
I can confirm that, yes, very, very much a non-alternative comedian. Sadly, of course, passed away a few months ago.
Yeah.
Yes. So, so sadly no longer with us. But no, that's a good shout. And one of those comedians as well that I remember bringing out a live VHS every year for the Christmas market. And I think my granddad had a couple, which I wasn't allowed to watch.
I'm not surprised.
Indeed. So, good choice there. It was between two for me, but I have picked one in the end. So I almost went for a double act in Lee and Herring. Stu and Lee and Richard Herring, of course, who are now since the early 2000s have been working separately. Richard Herring, of course, probably the father of the comedy podcast. I think we'd agree. But who I have gone for is somebody whose star shone the brightest in the 90s, and I've gone for Mark Lamar.
Interesting.
Who obviously was a team captain on Shooting Stars, and then began hosting Nevermind the Buzzcocks in 1996 as well. Left Buzzcocks in about 2004 or 5. I think he did it for about a decade. And he broadcasts on Twitter now. I think he had a radio show. Big music man, and he had a sort of late night radio show on Radio 2 for a long time where he would play records from his personal collection. But now I think he just tweets about great music, and he's a great person to follow on Twitter if you're not following him already. Somebody whose comedy star I think shone brightest in the 90s is Mark Lamar. So that's what I'm going for.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, he was very cool. And yeah, it was like as soon as he left, never mind the Barcocks, they never really recovered. I don't think, did they? Not fully. I know Simon Amstel was quite big and did it for a while, but yeah, Mark Lamar was just perfect for that sort of thing.
Incidentally, I'm watching all of the original Shooting Stars again on YouTube at the moment, and it's one of those things where it's 80% of it is like very much hit and miss. There's like 20% of it which is like gold, but then a lot of it doesn't really work. And it's one of those things where you've definitely got the rose tinted specs on and you think it was hilarious all the time.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's interesting because I do occasionally watch the sort of highlight reels on YouTube, especially the George Dawes one, which I watch.
Oh yeah.
Anytime I'm feeling down. So yeah, that's interesting to know that if you watch it in full, it's not quite as golden as we thought. I imagine that's probably true of quite a lot of 90s stuff. Although maybe I probably shouldn't say that.
Hey, come on,
bleep out.
Yeah, we're messing around. We're messing around with our content here. Come on. Just before we move on, do you remember last time I gave you the choice between two different pieces of football news? And you went for the David Seaman representing SafeStar story. Which means that I still have the 50-year-old ex-Premier League player turning out in the Southwest story for you. If you would like it now.
Oh, please.
Great. So if I say the name Joe Tessum to you, does that mean anything?
No, nothing.
Okay. Well, Joe Tessum was a Norwegian international who played in the Premier League for Southampton. Signed for them in 1999. He also played for Millwall and Bournemouth in the UK. And I was on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, as I do sometimes, as is my wont. And there was a tweet retweeted from a team called Hythe and Dibden, who play in the Wessex Football League, which is Southampton, Portsmouth, covers that area, Salisbury. And the tweet was Joe Tessum still doing it at the age of 50. And I had to, of course, clicked on the link, and there he is scoring a fantastic goal for Hythe and Dibden. And it turns out he's been turning out for them since 2018. He's scored 13 goals in 63 games. Before that, he played for another Hampshire side, Totton and Ealing, 8 goals in 97 appearances. And he's still turning out in the semi-pro leagues in England at the age of 50. So there you go, former Premier League and international attacking midfielder Joe Tessum, still turning it on in the Wessex League.
Oh, that's lovely. It's nice when you can sort of hear about these players who obviously just love the game so much that they'll play at whatever level. It doesn't matter if they're getting paid big bucks for it or not. They'll just they'll keep playing. That's a bit like Jamie Curson. You just get the sense that he'll never stop playing as long as he can actually do it physically. So yeah, that's really
Barry
nice.
Hales is another one, I think, who went on for a long time. I'm not sure if he's still playing, but he certainly was still at the age of sort of 46 or 47 the last time I saw. So no, fantastic. And if the body can still do it, then why not? Although it's a question that I ask myself on a weekly basis. But on this evidence, I've got a few years to go yet.
We're now going to get into the meat of the episode, which is of course UK politics in the 90s. So this is the first. Is it the first kind of serious issue we've done? I think we've done sort of media and popular culture.
Yeah, I think it is really in terms of heavy news and actual world events that changed the course of or had an effect on history in a way that pop culture can't. Then yeah, no, I think it is, and I'm sure we'll examine this with the same expert eye that we have with that we have everything else that we've spoken about.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. What did politics mean to you in the 90s? Obviously, we were both pretty young. I mean, I finished the 90s aged 14, and you would have been what, 12, I guess, 11 or 12.
Yes, 12. Yeah, the 12th birthday in December 99. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess.
Sorry, no, 11th birthday. I do apologize.
Yeah. So we were both pretty young, but yeah, do you have any memories, sort of general memories, before we get into our more sort of personal choices?
I remember the 97 election, the Labour landslide. I just remember it being a huge event. I remember Michael Portillo losing his seat at about 2:30 in the morning being a huge thing. I remember the only vivid memory I have is because obviously elections are always on a Thursday, and back in those days, my parents and I used to go to my gran and granddad's for a dinner on a Thursday night, and the polling station was just over the road at the community centre. So they all went to vote in shifts, and obviously somebody stayed at the house with me, and they all went to vote. And I remember asking everybody when they came back who they'd voted for, and I remember my nan telling me she'd voted for Father Christmas. Nice. Obviously, because a vote, as correctly, because a vote should be, should be kept yourself if that's the way you want to keep it. Yeah. So yeah, that's the first big memory I have of politics and what it meant and how it works.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. 97 was the first one I really remember, but I have vague memories of the Tories before that and John Major being the PM and stuff like that. But we'll get into it a bit more now with things we do remember and things we do want to talk about from the decade. Do you want to start with what the first thing you want to talk about is?
I certainly can, yeah. So I've actually gone with a couple of things that affected me directly, and they're both from the end of the decade. So my first two are from 1999, and I want to talk about the 20th of January 1999 specifically, which is the day that the news broke that Paddy Ashdown was going to resign as the leader of the Liberal Democrats after 11 years. This was big news in the West because he had been the MP for Yeovil since 1983. Wow. So he was a Southwest MP. Also, what happened on the 20th of January 1999 is that HTV News came to Caution Primary School to film an item on us. Mm-hmm. I can't remember what it was about, and I wasn't involved directly, but I remember there was huge excitement around the school. We all saw the cameras. We were all aware of what was going on. I remember the cameras being in the playground during playtime, and everybody trying to sort of play near the cameras so that they could possibly get into some shots.
Yeah.
But then Paddy Ashdown resigned the same day that, or said he was going to resign the same day that this was filmed, which meant that the following day on HTV News, almost the entire programme was taken up with the Paddy Ashdown story, and the Caution Primary thing got about 5 seconds. And I remember there being a brief clip inside one of the classrooms where I recognised a couple of kids in the year above me, but that was it, and the whole thing got bumped. So that's my first memory. Obviously, he'd had a little bit of trouble in 1992 when the famous Paddy Pants Down front page was published, when some allegations about his private life were published by a tabloid newspaper. I'm not sure if I've spoken about this before, but we did eventually get our moment in the sun on the local news when Caution Primary School became the first primary school in the region to allow Pokemon cards on site for use at break time and lunchtime. And we got on the news regarding that because it was such an outlandish thing, and the schools have been banning them all over the place. And it was such a story that we got on the news. And I did actually, you could see me on that item in one of the playground shots. So I did achieve my goal in the end. But yeah, Paddy Ashdown resigning has always stuck in my mind because of that. And also just a general point about HTV News, which was that, I mean, I realise it's the biggest part of the region and everything like that. And not only that, but the studio was also based in Bristol. But there always seemed to be far much more Bristol news and Yeovil news than there was anything to do with Wiltshire. Which often annoyed me because I thought there must be something going on in Wiltshire which is newsworthy, but it was almost always about Bristol.
I think you've kind of just shown why the news was mainly about Bristol when when the news story from Wiltshire was Pokemon training going on in a primary school in Cornwall.
That's it. I've answered my own question. The mystery is solved.
I mean, brilliant. I think a lot of people people who aren't from Wiltshire listening to this are probably thinking, well, it must have been a slow day news-wise in Wiltshire for that episode. But no, that was a big news day in Wiltshire. Pokemon trading card. I'm also picturing you in the back of the shot, sort of like one of those people who takes bets at the horse racing. You got your sort of long overcoat, and you're stood on a box, everyone's crowding around you, and you're like, you've got all the Pokemon cards in your hand. That's the image I have in my mind.
The irony is, I wasn't interested in Pokemon. I didn't care about it. I never played with the cards or anything. So all I was interested in was getting my mug on the screen. That was all.
Oh, okay.
So I had to pretend,
Yeah. Have you got any footage of that? I don't suppose you recorded on the VHS?
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay, so my first choice of something that sort of stands out from 90s politics for me sort of follows on a little bit from something you just mentioned there, which was the Paddy Pants Down headline, because the first thing I want to talk about is Sun newspaper headlines, or maybe more broadly tabloid newspaper headlines. But I think Sun newspaper headlines really stand out. So there were some key ones from the 92 election, especially as usual around this time, and for a lot of the time post 90s, the Sun had plumped for the Tories, and they were giving them their full backing. So in the 92 election, it was Neil Kinnock was standing for the Labour Party, and then John Major was obviously standing for the Tories. The Sun choosing Major and trying to sort of smear the Labour candidate and MPs wherever possible. Ran the headline, "Will the last person to leave Britain turn out the lights?" And it had a picture of Neil Kinnock's head sort of superimposed on a light bulb. And it was like a big headline, and it's sort of gone down in history as this sort of big slam of the opposition, and some say it really put paid to Kinnock's chances of winning the election. And then sure enough, Major won with a kind of a relatively surprising victory, I think. And then the following day, the Sun ran the headline, "It's the Sun what won it," which is another infamous headline of the era, and it still gets referenced today. And I think actually it gets used as an example to show how media sort of intrusion, or not necessarily intrusion, but the media can have a possibly a worrying power over election results, because the Sun switched their allegiances to the Labour Party in 97, and obviously Labour won that. And then I think the headline was "The Sun backs Blair" or something. So again, just making it very clear on the headline, front page headline, who they're supporting. And as far as I know, I think I've heard this, that the Sun has always backed the candidate that ended up winning, and it's obviously still going on to this day. And I guess that raises a lot of questions about how the power of the media when it comes to free and open elections, and if there's anything that can be done about that, and if there's anything that should be done about it. But then there's also the sort of headlines about sleaze and tittle tattle is always a part of politics. So there was like the David Mellor incident with the when he's having an affair with the actress. I think the headline was "Toe job to no job," because there was something about some foot fetish element to the affair, and then he lost it. David Mellor had to resign as a result of that.
Was there something to do with the Chelsea kit as well?
Yeah, and there was another headline was Mellor made love in Chelsea strip. Again, front page headline. It just feels like the early 90s and the mid 90s was sort of the high point, or the low point, depending on how you look at it, of tabloid front pages sort of being involved in politics and having a big impact on politics. It probably does still happen today to a certain extent. I think in the 2015 election, was the what's his name, Ed Miliband eating the bacon sandwich? Was that a front room?
Yes, it was.
Stuff like that. So they do obviously still have an impact, but I think those ones in the 90s just really stood out. I just think it was a big time for tabloid front pages back in the 90s, and
yeah. I mean, again, if you go over to football, one of our other favourite subjects, obviously, there's the famous Graham Taylor turnip front page, which possibly hastened his removal as England manager.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, this afternoon I've just finished I don't know if you've seen it yet, the 2-part documentary on Paul Gascoigne, which is which has been on the BBC recently, and the amount of power that the press wielded in his life. I mean, they pretty much ruined both his football career and his personal life. And it's quite a shocking and harrowing watch at points. Do they have as much power anymore in an internet age, and where obviously newspaper circulation will naturally have reduced, because now people mostly get their news from the internet and Twitter and places like that? Possibly not.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. I mean, you only have to look at stuff like Trump and conspiracy theories like QAnon and stuff to just see how much power the social media has. Yeah. Where sort of there are no rules in the way that even tabloids had, certain rules about what they could and couldn't post, and were, victims of libel law and whatnot. But so yeah, you're right. I think it's not quite as powerful as it was.
Suffice it to say that I hope one day to see a world where the Sun newspaper doesn't exist at all. But that's my own cross to bear.
That is one company that will never be sponsoring this pod. So
absolutely
don't worry
not
about that. Okay, what was the second thing you wanted to?
Yes.
Recall?
Talking of news, I'd like to read you something if I can. This is from the 26th of May 2000. And the headline is, this is from the Wiltshire Gazette and Herald. The headline is, Schools Minister gets a grilling from pupils. Education and Employment Secretary David Blunkett faced tough policy questions when he faced a children's council at Corsham Primary School on Monday. Youngsters quizzed Mr Blunkett about reducing class sizes and the qualities that made a good school when he visited to open a new classroom. Mr Blunkett scorned the government Jaguar in favour of a pillion ride on a Harley-Davidson motorbike, but his guide dog Lucy followed in the car. He enjoyed a tour of the school and stopped for a chat in the reception class, where 3 little girls called Lucy were invited to shake hands with the politician and pat Lucy the dog. He was very relaxed and approachable, said head teacher Fiona Allen. The children were able to chat to him and they loved it. One pupil told Mr Blunkett how much they enjoyed the literacy and numeracy hours. I'm very pleased to hear that, he replied. Corsham Primary School, which has 380 pupils, received nearly £90,000 funding from the new classroom and an extra teacher from the government's infant class size grant. Mr Blunkett said, I congratulate the head teachers, staff, governors and pupils on their hard work and commitment, which has helped to produce excellent test results for 11-year-olds in English and Maths last year. So that's the story. This comes a couple of months before I leave Corsham Primary School and head to secondary school. I was not directly involved in this. I was in the school council in year 5. This was when I was in year 6. So if I'd have been a year later, I would have got to show him round. However, my friend Mike Dutton was on the school council at the time, I remembered, and I messaged him earlier on and asked him if he had any memories of the day. And I'll just read you what he sent me. Here we go. So he says, my memory is that he was really warm and nice, seemed to actually listen and be interested in everything that we had to say, which was nice for an adult. And what a guy. He was clearly cool as he was allowed to bring a dog into school. A novel situation for a primary school kid trying to empathise with a blind person and be conscious of being helpful without patronising. Certainly a good life lesson. So thanks, Mike, for helping me out with that. Really appreciate it. This is something that sticks in my mind as well. We had a proper front bench minister come to visit us at Corsham Primary with his guide dog, and there were pictures in the local press and all sorts of things like that. I did come across yesterday, I was in Bath yesterday, and I came across a copy of David Blunkett's autobiography in a second-hand bookshop. I had a flick through the index. Unfortunately, Corsham Primary School isn't mentioned.
Did you look under motorcycle pillion riding? Just in case it was under that.
I only looked under C for Corsham, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, but I should have done. You're quite right. But yeah, there was a lot of buzz around this as well. And as I say, I wasn't directly involved in it, but I've always remembered it. And the Corsham Primary School then was Mrs. Allen, my head teacher, had sort of turned it around really, and it was a very, very high performing school by then. And I don't remember anything about the new classroom they talk about either. It might have possibly have been built, I suppose, after I left. Although I've just realised that in the article it says he visited to open a new classroom, so it must have been built while I was there. But I don't remember anything about it or where it was. This is a real great story, isn't it?
To be honest, it sounds like I'm starting to think that maybe this money didn't go to a new classroom. It was actually funneled off into someone's pocket or something else. I mean, it's not the sort of thing I would put past Corsham County Primary from what I hear about the school.
All right, Regis. All right. Let's not have any of that. Come on. Anyway, St Patrick's were our turf rivals.
Yeah. Okay.
They're right next door. We shared boundaries with them.
Yeah. It got really nasty, didn't it? The County Primary St Patrick's turf war.
It really did. It really did at points. Yeah, there was. We had to send a delegation once. I remember that. A delegation of Year Sixes went over to St Patrick's to talk about what was happening at lunchtimes. I mean, I had an idea. Just build a fence, man. I mean, that's the thing. There was no barrier, so you could just walk over. There was nothing there. So
yeah.
Take some of that 90 grand and build a fence. That's simple to me, and I'm 11. I can tell you that.
Fence building diplomacy, they call that.
Not bridge building, fence building. But yeah, just another something that sticks in my mind. Oh bollocks! 26th of May 2000. What have I done?
I was about to ask you to repeat the date because I was a little bit nonplussed as to.
I'll just rub a little more chilli in my eyes as well. Look, I joined Year 6 in 1999, all right, and that's the school year I was in when this took place. So
yeah,
are we just going to start counting the year 2000 as part of the 90s? I think we're going to have to.
So much great stuff happened in 2000. It is very tempting. I think you can just about get it in there based on the fact that yes, you joined that year in 99, okay. And right. I think Blunkett was very much an established name in the 90s.
All right, that's not as bad as the Californication thing, but bloody hell, no. I've really got to tighten up on this. Oh dear.
Well, let's move swiftly along before
please do
your head goes any further.
Can we just pause for a couple of minutes, mate? I got to go and wash my face because I actually can't see anything at the moment. Give me 2 seconds here, mate.
Well, that was a dramatic end to the second choice.
It's never boring, is it?
Okay, I'll move on to my second one, which is another sort of general theme, very kind of connected to my first choice, really, with the tabloids, which is 90s political satire. Mm-hmm. Again, I mean, I don't have any experience of the 80s. This may sound naive to anyone who's a bit older than us and remembers the birth of alternative comedy and stuff, but it feels to me like the 90s was a sort of a really high point for political satire. My memories and my knowledge of pre-97 politics in this country, so the Tories, the major government, is almost all comes from Spitting Image. I didn't really watch it that much because I was too young, but I must have seen bits here and there because all of those politicians of that government, like Douglas Hurd, Norman Lamont, Michael Portello, all those people I think of as their Spitting Image puppets. So, Douglas Hurd had the Mr. Whippy hair. Michael Portello was sort of in a tank. I seem to remember like a little tank he'd be driving around in because he was Defence Secretary. John Major's puppet was grey when everyone else's was in colour. Stuff like that, it kind of really stands out in my mind. I know Spitting Image was started in the 80s, but we're still going strong in the early 90s. And then How I Got News for You started in the 90s. The first episode premiered on the 28th of September 1990, so right at the start of the decade, and that's obviously still going today as a series currently on now with the same two team captains. So that was like a big thing, I think, for the 90s, and there were some iconic moments from that program in the 90s, like there was Roy Hattersley didn't turn up as a guest, so they replaced him with a tub of lard, famously. And then there's Ian Hislop and Clive Anderson eviscerating Piers Morgan when he was the editor of the Daily Mirror, because he came on and was just classic Piers Morgan.
The tragic tale of a 2-ton hippo who swallowed a tennis ball in Germany.
Surely you must have covered that in the Daily Mirror.
Yes, I know.
That's exactly a page 5 story.
What do you know about newspaper editing, Clive?
About as much as you do.
Dear, Clive. So you plunge merrily deeper.
No, I know it's not fair, because the Mirror now is almost as good as the Sun. The last time I was rude to you, you sent photographers around to my doorstep the next day, so I'm not doing that again.
No. You won't see them this time.
Sorry. He is charming, isn't he?
So don't try the popularity line with me, Hislop.
Why?
Anybody here like it? Do you like him? Anybody actually like it?
I may not know much about editing newspapers, Piers, but Ian is a regular on this show. These are all people come to see Ian. We're strangers. They don't like us. They've never heard of us.
Although I wasn't cheering then, I must say.
And then, yeah, like I said, alternative comedy started in the 80s, obviously, but I think it really continued into the 90s. And a lot of comedians who got really big, maybe into the 2000s, or still going strong now, I think sort of started in the 90s. So you got, in terms of political comedians, people like Alexi Sale, Mark Steele, and Jeremy Hardy. Jeremy Hardy, obviously, sadly no longer with us, but they're all, we're still going into the 2000s, but they would really cut their teeth, I think, in the 90s. Probably died down a lot with the New Labour election victory, but still, I think, yeah, political satire of the 90s, I think, was really strong and quite cutting, and still a legacy of the Thatcher era, which only came to an end in 1990. So it did actually go into the 90s a little bit.
No, cool. I picked up on Have I Got News for You? Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds very young, but probably when I was in year 6, around about 99, 2000, and a bit like Shooting Stars, which I spoke about earlier with Mark Lamar, is that I was allowed to watch these things, and I probably didn't really understand a lot of what was going on at the time. But on the other hand, I knew that it was funny, and it's the same with what I spoke about in Match Magazine in the last episode. You learn a lot about politics and the wider world in general from watching these things and absorbing them.
Yeah.
And having looked back at obviously the shows that were broadcast before I picked up on it, one of my favourite Have I Got News for You moments is when there's a Euro MEP who's come on called I think his name's Teddy Taylor or something like that, and he's one of these people that doesn't understand the program that he's come on to. It's like when, again, Shooting Stars, when Larry Hagman went on Shooting Stars and he did not understand what was happening to him. This Teddy Taylor thought that Have I Got News for You was a serious political discussion program. Yeah. And every joke they made, he spent about 5 minutes trying to deconstruct it and say why that was unfair and what was wrong about it, and so's a good person and all this sort of thing. Yeah. I'm sure there's clips of it online, but yeah, that's one that I always enjoy when I look back at it. But I mean, as you say, still going strong again. 32 years now, and yeah, fantastic. Long may it continue. And obviously there are other things that have come up in its trail, things like Mock the Week and that sort of thing. But Have I Got News for You? Still the original and best for sure.
Do you have a third thing to bring to us?
Let me just double check the date. I'm so fed up of this. I'm so fed up of letting everybody down. And I don't know how I could have made this mistake again. I really don't. But the thing is, it's recorded now, so we're going to have to put it out, and then everyone will know. Right. I want to talk about Wednesday, the 2nd of July, 1997, which is another specific date that sticks in my mind. And this is the date that the first budget was delivered by the new Labour government. So they'd come in a couple of months before, in the May, which we've already discussed, and their first budget was on the 2nd of July. Now, I've had a look on YouTube, and it must have been broadcast on both channels, and I have had a look at the Radio Times genome on the BBC website to confirm this, and it was the budget was broadcast live that afternoon on both the BBC and ITV. The main reason I remember this is because, of course, if you're broadcasting it on a weekday afternoon, that means that there's no CBBC or CITV. And I remember turning on the TV that afternoon when I got in from school, expecting my favourites, Sooty and Co., possibly Sabrina the Teenage Witch, so maybe 97's a bit early for that, I don't know. And to be faced with the House of Commons, lots of people in suits, the big red box, the dispatch box. Yeah. And just being absolutely devastated and being forced to go and do something like playing outside instead. And this was something that happened then regularly, as throughout the years, a couple of times a year, the kids' TV shows would be taken off for an afternoon, and it'd be replaced by the budget. And it's just something that's always stuck in my mind as a huge disappointment when it came round.
It's about the worst thing you can interrupt a kids' TV program with, isn't it? I think.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, obviously important, but very, very dry. And I want to know who's actually sitting there watching the whole 4 or 5 hours of it.
Yeah.
And taking it all in. Obviously, this is in the days before rolling news channels and more than 5 channels on the TV for most people. So there wasn't a lot of choice, and now there are dedicated children's TV channels. There are dedicated news channels. So they wouldn't need to, in this day and age, unless something really, really important to happen, they wouldn't need to take Garden Rescue off on a Wednesday afternoon to show the budget. I spoke about this with my dad, as I often do. I often run float these things past him in the run up to a record to see if he's got anything to say. And he said that when he was growing up in the 1970s, the TUC conference used to be broadcast live on the TV, and that was even drier. So there's obviously a history of these things happening. But yes, it's just something that's always stuck with me, and the budget 97 in particular. For some reason, I always recall that. So yeah, it's the removal of children's TV for a day for the budget on the major TV channels, which I thought was wrong at the time, and I still think it's wrong now.
Yeah, I suppose that's the one good thing about switching kids' TV to separate channels and moving away from the 5 terrestrial channel only situation we used to have, is that your kids' TV schedule is no longer interrupted. But aside from that, I do still think we should go back to having children's BBC and CITV on a weekday afternoon up until 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Point starts at 5:15. Let's not.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Let's not mess with that.
Yes.
They can go till have 3 o'clock till 5:15, and then that's plenty. Yeah.
I guess,
but no, totally agree.
Yeah. It used to be Neighbours, I think, in our day after children's BBC. That was always the sign that it was all over and time to have supper. But yeah, good choice. Your first introduction to politics was tinged with melancholy and frustration. So setting you up, I think, for your adult life
of melancholy and frustration.
Yeah. I meant it specifically in relation to politics, but I guess with anything really.
Go on, what's your final one?
My final one, I'm gonna sort of run down what I think the most significant moments of 90s politics were. Just like 3 or 4 things which I think really defined a decade, rather than just choosing one. So I'd say 4 things really. Thatcher stepping down in the end of 1990. So she'd obviously had this sort of revolt from led by her own MPs, who sort of ousted her from the party, led to the famous scene of her leaving Number 10 with tears in her eyes, and that sort of famous shot of her looking out the back window. So that was massive. I mean, she'd been Prime Minister for since 79, so 11 years. That was crazy. And then there was the Black Wednesday, which was on 16th of September 1992. And this is something I have never understood. I don't know what it is. Don't understand what it means. I can read all I can about it, by which, of course, I mean the Wikipedia entry. But something to do with the UK government withdrawing the pound from the European exchange rate mechanism. I don't understand it. I don't understand how money works or anything, but I'm told it was very significant. Then there's the Good Friday Agreement, which was a massive thing. Obviously changed the course of UK and Irish politics pretty much to this day. That was in 1998. And I think, the Good Friday Agreement sort of meant that people like us grew up in a much safer UK and Ireland. And then I think the number one most defining thing of the 90s was the 97 election. That was such a turning point. It was a turning point for who was in charge. Obviously, it'd been Tories for 11 years and then went to Labour, which then lasted until 2010, I guess. Yeah, 2010. Yep. And it was also a turning point for Labour, becoming New Labour. which was a sort of new identity for them. And it was just like a whole different, just feels like before that and after that, just completely different times. I know that's sort of coloured by the fact that we were at an age where we were becoming conscious of it. So 97 was the point at which we started to understand what was going on a bit. So that's probably feeding into it a lot. But I mean, I can't imagine what a change that must have been like for our parents' generation to have, whether they were Tories or Labour supporters or what. But that was a defining era, I think, of the 90s. And it was obviously soundtracked by D. Ream and Things Can Only Get Better.
Of course.
I looked up D. Ream when I was researching this because I wanted to know. I'm sort of fascinated about these sort of one-hit wonder bands and where they are now. So I did have to have a look and see what they were up to. And sadly, they don't seem to have really done much since Things Can Only Get Better, with the exception, of course, of Brian Cox, who went on to become a famous
national treasure
TV presenter, scientist. But yeah, they've released 2 albums since 1995, one in 2011, one in 2021. Neither of them charted. But I did notice that they released a greatest hits album in 97. They'd only had 2 albums before that. They did that thing that some bands do when they get like a one-hit wonder, of releasing a greatest hits when they've only got 2 albums out, which is, you can't do that, can you? You can't do
I
that.
don't think so. No, how many album tracks are on there? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be half one album and half the other album. But, I should also point out that 97 saw the first openly gay politicians elected to UK Parliament, Ben Bradshaw and Stephen Twigg, and I thought that was worth a mention as a significant moment in LGBTQIA plus history. So that was very nice. And yeah, I just thought those 4 things were the defining things, I think, of the decade.
Cool. We've had a bit of correspondence just in about the Black Wednesday ERM thing, which may help us to shed some light on it. So this is from our correspondent George Alty. He says, I was on a NATO exercise at Lynham on Black Wednesday when interest rates were set to move to 15% to make people buy the pound. The evaluating officer was having kittens as his mortgage would have been some stratospheric number. Nobody bought sterling, so he pulled out of the ERM. Does that clear it up for you?
Kind of. I don't really understand the concept of buying money, but maybe I'm just...
I know some places in Chippenham you can buy money if you want to... I'll fill you in afterwards.
Okay. Yeah,
that's a joke. I don't.
He does listen. I know. Yeah, we actually had some correspondence as well from Kevin, friend of the pod, Kevin, on Facebook for his choices as well. He said there's some fairly obvious momentous political moments in the 90s. So New Labour's seismic win in 97, the Good Friday Agreement, etc. But a less totemic one, I guess, which always springs to my mind when I think back to the 90s, is the Jeremy Paxman interview of Michael Howard on Newsnight in May 1997. He asked Howard the same question, did you threaten to overrule him? 12 times. It was the first moment that it really hit home just how evasive and obstructive politicians can be when it comes to the truth.
I was entitled to express my views. I was entitled to be consulted.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I was not entitled to instruct Derek Lewis, and I did not instruct him. And
did you threaten to overrule him?
The truth of the matter is that Mr. Marriott was not suspended.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I did not overrule Derek Lewis.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I took advice on what I could or could not do.
Did you threaten to overrule him, Mr. Howard?
Scrupulously in accordance with that advice. I did not overrule Derek Lewis.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
Mr. Marriott was not suspended.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I have accounted for my decision to dismiss...
Just amazing moment of 90s TV and 90s politics in one. So, yeah, so thanks for that, Kev. Nice correspondence. So, yeah, that just about wraps up our very quick overview of the decade in politics. Some big moments, some smaller moments, some rather large moments on the pod itself with certain dates being thrown around. But I enjoyed it. Yeah, I think felt a bit strange, a bit out of our comfort zone doing something a bit more serious like that. But
yeah, I mean, I think I think I'm going to blame the chili for the date mix-up.
You did pre-warn us, actually. So
I did, and I can only apologise again. I was just so taken with the memory of it that failed to realise I was 5 months in the 5 months in the wrong direction. But it's becoming a bit of a thing for me on this pod, isn't it? So it'll probably happen again. But I'll just apologise now.
No, come on, keep your head up. We go again. We go again.
We go again.
Just a little note. I've just realised I'm drinking Caffrey's, the official brown ale of the pod. No, sorry, it's not the official. What am I saying? The official Irish ale of the pod.
Yes,
The
please.
official brown ale is Stones, of course. But I noticed that it was founded in 1897, so it is a 90s ale.
There we are.
Get it in there.
What more can you ask?
Thank you again to Caffrey's for providing the drinks for the pod at just a small expense to us. So yes, like I mentioned, if you want to get in contact with us about anything you've heard in today's episode, we would love to hear from you. But also anything in previous episodes, any of the What's the Most 90s, if you've got any ideas for what we should cover in What's the Most 90s, let us know. You can do so on Twitter at allright90s, email allright90s@gmail.com, facebook.com/allright90s. All of those are just letters, no numbers. And also we're on Instagram using allright.90s.podcast. And yes, we'd love to hear from you. Stu, if you wouldn't mind doing the goodbyes, because I messed up so badly last time, I can't do it.
Well, we should probably just mention that next time we'll be talking cigarettes and alcohol in the 90s with brother of the pod, Adam Greenwood.
Oh, yes.
So, yes, if you've got anything on that, do write in as well, because that's our next episode coming up. We're also going to have a huge announcement in that episode regarding a little project we've been working on.
Yes.
So, yeah, please do tune in for that. But until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. See you next time.
Ta-ta.
Bye.
I'm having a fucking nightmare is what I'm doing. It's all gone wrong.
Oh, no.
I've been talking about the year 2000 again. They said they'd kick me off if I did this again. What am I going to do?